Alright, let's go. When I was 10 years old, I moved in with my grandmother. The neighborhood has not changed much since then. The trees are obviously a lot taller, but there are still cracks in the pavement that were there when I first moved in. Grandma died last year and I inherited the home. I am constantly given offers for it as it backs onto a forest and a lake, and it really is a stunning piece of property. But this is my home, and it just wouldn't feel right to sell it. It really was the perfect street to grow up on, though. There was hardly any traffic. I could ride my bike with my eyes closed, literally, and not worry. I would color the pavement with chalk well into the night, and I would rollerblade up and down the street. And again, I would never worry about cars. It was safe and quiet. It was beautiful. But the only problem was that I had no playmates. When I moved in, I was the only new kid on the block. Please excuse the pun. It was an older neighborhood at that point, and with mostly retired couples, all of their kids were grown and had moved away. I was the only child on the street, and with my grandmother being a proponent of homeschooling, I was pretty lonely and pretty desperate to meet a friend. Every day after school with Grandma, she would make me go out and play. Now this was before internet, before cell phones, before any technology, really. So I would spend hours just rollerblading or walking up and down the street or going to our little park, which I'll get into in a minute. It was on one of these walks where I encountered something that still, to this day, gives me chills, even as an adult. I had almost reached the end of my street where the last houses connect to a forest. The forest surrounds our neighborhood. I was about to walk the trail down to the lake when I heard a door slam, and then I saw a person running across the lawn in my peripheral vision. It was the house that had been for sale since I had moved in with my grandma. At the time, I didn't realize it was strange that it had sat empty for that long, that nobody had bought it. Our neighborhood was, and it still is, very desirable because of the forest and the lake. But as a kid, it was simply just an empty house on my street, and I didn't really think about it. I watched the person run across the driveway, and then they bumped into the for sale sign that was sitting at the end of it. It was the kind that had the little chains on either side. When the person made contact with it, the sign swung back and forth. And that is how I know I didn't imagine it. Not only did I hear the sign swinging, but I also saw it. It was a young girl, at least I assumed, because she was wearing a pink jacket, but I couldn't see her face. She was wearing a really big mask, one of those thick latex Halloween masks, the kind that leave your face just covered in sweat when you've only worn it for a little while. But the mask, it was about 3 sizes too big for her, and it was swinging around on her head wildly. As the girl ran towards the forest, the front of the mask swung around to the back of her head, and I could see the mask's giant blue eyes. I have never really understood masks like that. Why wear a regular person's face as a mask? They're almost creepier than monster masks, but that's beside the point. I think I yelled, "Hey," or something like that, assuming that she had just moved into the house. I was really excited to maybe have a friend on the street, but the girl didn't stop and kept running towards the forest. So, before we continue, the cool thing about this neighborhood is that it basically has its own private forest and lake, which I somewhat already mentioned. It's a dead-end street that opens up to a trail in between the last houses. The trail leads down to a small lake, and there's no car access from anywhere, so our street really is the only way to get in, and it's like our own little park. I watched as the girl in the pink jacket and mask ran toward the trail entrance, and I was so excited to meet her that I started following behind her. The entrance leads to a fork. I guess you could call it that. To the right is this nice, easy walking trail that leads down to the lake. To the left is just dense forest that doesn't really have a pathway. It's practically always been blocked off by these huge, really old bramble blackberry bushes. You could walk that way if you really wanted to, but you would get cut up really badly because there's no trail. The neighborhood picks the berries every year, and they're amazing. I hadn't been that far behind the girl when I spotted her, so when I got onto the trail and didn't see her, I was surprised. I assumed maybe that she'd run down to the lake, which wasn't really that far, but Grandma had a rule that I wasn't allowed to go to the lake past 4 p.m. without her. It was getting dark at that point, so I turned around, and I thought maybe I would wait for my new potential friend on our lawn. I turned around to leave, and then from behind me, I heard a voice ask, quote, "Why are you following me?" unquote. I turned around, and there she was, with the mask still on. The mask had this fake blonde hair and these big, dopey-looking blue eyes. I'm still not sure why, but my immediate response was to tell her that I hadn't been following her, even though I had been. I think I was just embarrassed and a little angry from how she had startled me. She had literally come out of nowhere. She must have been hiding behind a tree or something, because still to this day, I don't know how I hadn't seen her when I first entered the trail. I asked her where she came from, and she pointed to the left side of the trail she'd been hiding in the bushes. Remember, the area that wasn't really a trail, but just full of huge old berry bushes. I was confused and I asked her how she didn't get cut up by the branches, and she said that she had found a way through them. A little hidden trail that led to an old treehouse. She said she'd found the treehouse earlier when exploring and invited me to come and see it with her. I wanted to go and see the treehouse. It sounded cool, but the mask was really starting to creep me out at that point. So I asked her politely to take it off. Her response to this day still terrifies me. She said, quote, "I'm not wearing a mask," unquote. I waited for her to tell me that she was joking, but she just stood there. It was like a weird face-off. She didn't move her arms or adjust her footing. She didn't touch the mask. She just stood there looking at me. I remember how uncomfortable I felt at that point, but I said, quote, "My name's Abby. What's yours?" unquote. The girl proceeded to repeat back what I had just said. "My name's Abby. What's yours?" It wasn't the fact that she repeated the exact words, which, don't get me wrong, was still very creepy, but it was more so the fact that her voice suddenly changed. It was my voice, meaning she had mimicked it perfectly. Inflation, tone, the pacing of my words. I think maybe she was mocking me because I had a pretty high-pitched voice. But still, there was something about it that made me want to get as far away from her as possible. She repeated my question a second time, once again perfectly mimicking my voice. And that was when I knew I needed to get out of the forest. We were maybe only 100 feet away from the trail entrance, and I was a fast runner, so I knew that I could outrun this girl, this weird girl, especially when she refused to take her mask off. But I didn't want her chasing after me. I wasn't sure what she was gonna do, and I didn't want her to know how badly she was scaring me. So I pretended to be fascinated by her colorful shoes, and I asked her, "Where did you get those?" When she looked down at them, distracted, that was when I bolted for the street, and I made it back in maybe 10 seconds, though it was probably less. I glanced back, and I saw the girl still standing there in the same spot, not moving. I ran back to my grandma's house, and I sat on the stoop, completely out of breath, and I watched the trailhead, expecting the girl to come out and go back to her house at any minute. But she never came out. I asked my grandma if she knew who had moved into the empty house, because their daughter was, quote, "a real jerk." I used more colorful language, which Grandma scolded me for, but she said that nobody had moved in and the house was still for sale. She was friends with the realtor, so she was positive that nobody had actually moved in, even though to this day I know I heard that door slam shut. I am 100% positive that that was the house that the girl in the mask came from. I never saw the girl in the mask ever again, and it was only a few years after that incident that I left for college. After college, I moved back in and I inherited the house when Grandma died. A few years back, I became friends with a couple who moved into that house. They had started a huge landscaping project in the backyard, as the property had been pretty neglected for all those years. And my boyfriend and I at the time went over for a barbecue after they had really gotten the project underway. It was there when I saw the treehouse from their backyard. It wasn't on their property, but there was a clear view of it from their fence line. The treehouse was in the forest, about 12 feet off the ground, and built so that the tree itself went right through the floor. It had a roof, walls, a window, and a regular-sized door with a few pieces of wood hammered across, blocking the entrance. And it looked like it was about to collapse at any minute. I asked my neighbor about it, and Rob said that he was going to demolish it soon, even though it wasn't on their property. They were worried that their two kids might sneak over the fence, climb the ladder up to it, and play around up there. And to be honest, the integrity of it was just too risky. They didn't know the history of it at all or when it had been built, and it was simply too dangerous for their children to be playing on or near it. I asked some of the other neighbors about it over the years, but nobody knows when that treehouse was built or who built it. I truly don't know what happened that day, or if this is even spooky to other people. I don't know if the girl in the mask that day was simply trying to scare me with a weird joke, or if I imagined this whole thing. Though deep down, I know I didn't. I know I met somebody that day in the forest, and the energy around her was very off. That's the only way I can describe her. I don't know who she was. I don't know what she wanted, and I don't know why she refused to take the mask off. And I don't know if it was her treehouse. I have contemplated if she was a ghost. I'm not sure. The only thing I do know is that I do not ever, ever want to meet her again. The Oregon coast is one of my favorite places in the entire world. The air is thick with salt and stories, the kind that stay with you, and one that I want to tell you about today. I remember walking down Broadway Street in Seaside about 15 years ago, just wandering the way that you do in a place that feels both new and somehow old. super charming. The sky a washed out watercolor, and the town itself was calm, completely relaxed, like it had all the time in the world. I don't remember the name of the thrift store. Honestly, I barely even remember walking into it. It's like something just pulled me inside. And even now, if I were to go back there at the snap of my fingers, I don't think I could ever find it again. It's as if this place existed just for that one moment, and then it quietly disappeared. Most of the place was cluttered with the usual things. Water-stained books, mismatched dishes, old but really well-made furniture, forgotten souvenirs. But in the very back, tucked away like it was waiting, was a wall of memories. Old, handwritten letters, vintage postcards, sepia-tone photos from lives long ago. And the coolest part, very old photo albums, stacks of them, heavy and cracked with time, each one a silent archive of someone else's life story. No order, just thrown together on a dusty shelf like forgotten relics. And for some reason, that unsettled me. It felt almost disrespectful. These weren't just objects. These were pieces of people. Their lives, their families, their memories. And now they were sitting here, exposed and discarded, waiting for strangers to flip through them with dirty hands. Like junk, and just for entertainment. I hovered in front of them for a while before finally reaching for one. The leather cover was brittle, flaking at the edges. It smelled faintly of mildew and something sweeter, and I thought that somebody had maybe pressed flowers and left them in the pages for too long. The moment that I touched it, and I still cannot explain this, but I felt weird. I felt heavier somehow, as if I had just realized that I was in my body or something. Everything around me went still, and I just felt off. As I opened the cover of the album, the spine crackled like dry bone. Very ASMR. Inside, rows of black and white faces, none of them smiling. Just the way that people took photos so long ago. Eyes were too sharp, staring too directly. There was something almost accusatory in their silence, like they knew that they had been abandoned, and they were mad about it. I turned to a new page. More people who had lived and loved and died, was beautiful holding that history, and suddenly I really wanted to take it home. But then, just as I was turning to another page, I heard it. It was my own inner voice. At least, I thought it was. Wait, is that my voice? It was some sort of whisper. Or was it coming from me? It was soft, close, and it almost felt right against my ear. I had never felt a sensation of not being able to distinguish my own thought from something coming outside. But I heard the words, clear as day. Put it back. Put it back. I stood there, frozen, my hand still resting on the open page. My heart was pounding. Everything around me was perfectly still, though, and no one else seemed to notice. Not the other customers, not the owner, not even my mom. I looked at the album again, turning to a new page. More people who had lived and loved and died. It was a very strange blend of beautiful history and something else. My mom came over and she said how neat the album was. She said I should absolutely get it. And for that moment, I agreed. I tried to brush the unease away, the strange voice that I thought I heard. But as I walked up to the register, something hit me hard. A wave of nausea. It was dizzying and sudden. My skin went cold, and I knew, without knowing how I knew, that I was not supposed to take this book. That whatever spirits were lingering in those pages, they didn't want to leave with me. I set the album down, gently, almost like an apology, and I left, actually believing that I was respecting the wishes of those people in that photo album. I have never forgotten that feeling, and maybe that's why I started looking into haunted books in the first place. It's almost become an obsession. This did not happen to me, but I was with my sister when it happened. It was maybe 15 years ago. I was still in elementary school and my sister was in college. I used to be scared of sleeping by myself, so I would either sleep with her on the weekends or with my parents during the week. Weird schedule, I know. Something to note is that my family is very religious. We have grown up in church, and we have always had that in our lives. But apparently, she had woken up to the TV screen being fuzzy, and she was completely frozen. She was not known to have sleep paralysis, so this was completely out of left field for her. She said that she kept telling herself in her head, "Wake up, wake up, you need to wake up." But she couldn't move, she couldn't speak, she couldn't scream, and she could barely breathe. She felt a heavy weight on her chest, like someone or something was holding her down. She felt like something was in the room, something that was not welcome. She tried to pray out loud, but all she could manage to get out was a tiny little sound. All of a sudden, she looked over to the corner of the room, and there stood a dark shadow figure. The only thing she could describe it as was something that looked like the Grim Reaper. It stood there, and it slowly pointed at her. She was completely frozen. She couldn't move. I was still asleep next to her, so I had no idea what was going on, or what was going on, or was even, sorry, my head. I was still asleep next to her, so I had no idea what was going on, and was not affected by anything. She kept trying to scream for what felt like forever, and she finally managed to get out a small cry. She immediately started praying out loud and saying that she rebuked whatever this thing was in the name of Jesus. The second that she finished her prayer, the shadow figure disappeared. The worship music came back on, and the weight on her chest lifted. She immediately got up and ran out to her mom, who was still awake at the time, I think cleaning the kitchen. She likes to clean at night. I don't know why. Anyways, as people who are religious, we definitely believe in demonic and evil beings. Whether you believe in that stuff or are religious, I think we can all collectively agree that thing was not nice. After that, she had my dad come in and bless her room along with the whole house, and she has never had anything like that happen since. Oh my God. I have a question. So, that wasn't my story. I'll give you guys that one. That was a viewer story. And I am genuinely asking this out of curiosity, and I mean absolutely no disrespect. I don't see how this would be disrespectful, but I just want to preface it with that. But as somebody who, I'm not religious, but I don't know what I am. I believe in something, but I did not grow up going to church or, reading anything. I didn't grow up with anything of that sort. But I'm just curious, as somebody, or if people grow up very religious and it's a big part of their life, you allowed to listen to ghost stories and read about ghost stories and demonic things? I'm genuinely curious. Or is that frowned upon? It's really interesting to me. If someone is very religious, can you still find ghost stories and stuff interesting and kind of fun to listen to? Is it still fun to get creeped out by them, or is it kind of something that you're not supposed to be doing? I'm sure a lot of you are able to answer that, and I would love to be educated on it if you can. I'd appreciate it. I had finished college late one cold winter evening, and it was already dark out. I was alone, and the college that I went to was in the city center, and the city center is not a place you would like to be during the night. So I was already on edge when this happened. I was headed to the bus stop to catch the bus home, but about halfway to the stop, a woman started walking towards me. I couldn't make out her features, but she was wearing a long black puffer coat. I thought she would just walk around me, but she kept walking straight towards me. As she got right in front of me, she suddenly collapsed. She just fell. It looked like how a cartoon character would fall, just sudden. She didn't trip on anything, so I had no idea what happened. I just stood there shocked as I looked at her on the floor. She wasn't moving and her eyes were closed. So I asked, "Are you okay?" But I got no response. I looked around behind me, but nobody was there. It was just me and this woman. But I felt like I was being watched. Then my mind raced with different scenarios of this being some sort of scam or possibly something worse. Then I just ran away. I ran away from there up the path. When I had gotten some distance away, I looked back and she was gone. I was terrified, so I ran to the bus stop as fast as I could, and I got away from that area. My mind was racing, thinking about what might have happened to me if I had stayed for a little bit longer. When I was 10 years old, I was alone very often, so I had to keep myself entertained. One day I was playing Barbies on the floor of my bedroom. No one else was in the house, and everything was fine. Then I had to go to the washroom, so I put my Barbies down, and before standing up, I randomly said to my Barbies out loud, "Don't move." I don't even know why I said that. It just kind of came to me. I went to the bathroom, then I went back into my room, and that was when I noticed that one of my Barbies was now at least 1.5 feet away from where I left her. I froze. I calmly picked them up, stuffed them in a drawer, and I literally never played with them in that house ever again. People from North Jersey might be familiar with it. Next to it sits our visitor center, formerly the lighthouse keeper's quarters. Last summer, I got put on the graveyard shift for a pay period. While out tooling around the fort, the park is an old army base. Around 2 in the morning, changing all the Pokemon gyms to Team Mystic, I noticed that there was a light on in the second floor of the quarters. One of the interbrangers must have forgotten to turn it off, I say to myself. So I head on in. I do a quick sweep of the building, and I turn the light off. I go back outside, get in my car, and I am about to drive away when I look back to the second floor. The light is back on, and something just moved across the window. My mind's eye saw a human figure, but I honestly noped the hell out of there so fast that it could have just been a bat or something else. The stairs to my attic had smelled like burnt hair for 3 days. Extremely odd because it was just that area, and I have a very old, drafty house. On day 4, I came home from work just before midnight, and as soon as I walked through the door, I felt like I had someone standing over my shoulder, breathing down my neck. This feeling was so strong that I opened my medicine cabinet so the mirror was against the wall. I also showered with the shower curtain open because I had a powerful need to see the room. After a shower, I was a little bit less on edge until I walked past my 4-year-old daughter's bedroom. The door was closed, but I heard her talking in her sleep. Then I heard a loud crash. I slowly opened the door to find her sleeping on top of the covers and the pile of stuffed animals that she insisted on sleeping with was scattered across the room. I turned the light on low, looked around the room, and I checked her breathing. All seemed well, so I went to bed. The next morning, I asked her if she had had a bad dream. Her, quote, "Yeah, there was a man with no arms, and he had sauce on his face, and he kept laughing at me. I told him to go away, but he wouldn't. Then an arm came out of my wall, threw me into the ceiling, and I crashed back down on my bed, and then I went to sleep." Unquote. I asked her, sauce on his face? And she said, yeah, like red spaghetti sauce. Nope. I smudged every single corner of every single room of my house, ending at the front door. I smudged everyone who lives in the house before I let the rest of them come back in. I haven't had any major incidents since, but since we've been in the house, once every year or so, something, sometimes a full box, falls off of a shelf in the basement basement or in the attic. That has never stopped. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Nope. When you hear stories of ghosts that can suddenly actually manipulate physical things in our world, that's when I start noping out. I'm fine with a ghost that can turn your radio volume up louder or play a song or make a phone call, something like that, like some sort of message. But when ghosts start pushing toys around or pushing boxes off of shelves, I'm done. I'm out. I grew up in a seriously haunted house, so it takes a lot for something paranormal to scare me. I have seen things, heard things, you name it. Startle me, sure. Scare me, no. Here is the only time that I have ever actually been scared. I lived in an apartment complex about 11 years ago, and other than some terrifyingly large wolf spiders, never heard or saw anything paranormal there. Then the old dude who lived across from me had a party one weekend, and his brother passed away. His body was there for quite a while, and everyone thought that he was simply sleeping. After he passed, I would occasionally hear some odd sounds, but nothing major. Then one night, I was laying in the bed with my toddler, waiting for her to go to sleep, and something blocked the light that had been shining into the room from our bathroom. I whipped my head up off the pillow, and I actually looked toward the door, and there was a black mass that was loosely in the shape of a person standing in the doorway. My whole body started tingling, and I squeezed my eyes shut because I was terrified and unsure if it was a real person who had broken in or if it was something paranormal. I popped my eyes back open, and this thing was gone. So I hopped up out of bed and I grabbed my shotgun and a couple of shells, and I took off after it. The only door into the apartment still had both locks locked, and the chain was still in place. The windows were closed and they were locked. I checked under every bed and inside all of the closets, and I found nothing. I heard noises again after that, but I never saw anything. I moved a couple of months later when my lease was up. Okay. I worked in a haunted bowling alley once. Our deceased mechanic gave my ponytail a yank in a room where I was the only person, and this was verified by the security camera. And there wasn't anything there to catch my hair on. He was a person who liked to be playful, and he was not malicious. This one happened to my husband. We live on a piece of property out in the swamp. Our house is pretty isolated. My husband woke up from a dead sleep to somebody knocking on our front door. He said that it was the exact mannerism that I knock with, and then a voice said, "Honey," exactly the same way that I say it. He peeked over the headboard to look at the front porch, and there was nobody there. You can see the front door clearly from our bedroom window, and there is no hiding spots for one of the local people to mess with us. Someone said that that was your Vardogr. I think it's a Nordic language, so I'm sorry for the pronunciation. But a Vardogr is a spirit predecessor. It's like someone's spirit, in this case yours, arriving before you do. I have read numerous accounts of this happening, and I find it absolutely fascinating. So a Vardogr is a spirit predecessor in Scandinavian folklore. Stories typically include instances that are nearly deja vu in some substance, but in reverse, where a spirit with the subject's footsteps, voice, scent, or appearance and overall demeanor precedes them in a location or activity. This results in witnesses believing that they have seen or heard the actual person before the person physically arrives. This bears a subtle difference from a doppelganger with a less sinister connotation. It has been likened to being a phantom double or form of bilocation. In Finnish folklore, the concept is known as etiäinen. Etiäinen. Sorry, it's so wrong. Originally, Vardogr was considered a sort of guardian spirit. Thus, it's a representation of a human's inner essence, which manifests as an animal that most closely resembles the personality of the human. That's so interesting. It can be seen as a premonitory sound or sight of a person before they arrive. It can also be interpreted as a harbinger. The word is from Old Norse, consisting of the elements vord, caretaker, guard, or watchman, akin to warden, and huger, meaning mind or the soul. The same concept exists in Sweden, but under a different name, which also derives from Old Norse. Oh my gosh. This person thinks they had a similar encounter. Oh, they said, my mother had a very similar story. Parents had just bought their first home. It was in the country. I was an infant. Dad was at work. Mom heard him fumbling at the door and trying to unlock it. And this was around 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. She gets up to open it for him when she hears the voice. She has heard this voice a few times in her life, telling her, quote, "Turn on the light," unquote. His voice has saved her life before. She does as it told her to do. The fumbling at the door stops, and then she hears someone running away. She freaks out, is completely on edge until my dad eventually does come home within an hour of this happening. She heats up some dinner for him and tells him what happened. They both go sit in the living room to watch the 11 o'clock news. Breaking news at the top of the hour. An inmate has escaped from a local prison tonight. Police are asking residents to lock all of your doors, all of your windows, and be on the lookout for ... They both looked at each other with that prison is only a couple of miles away look. Dad calls the cops. The guy is found only a couple